My name is Rebecca Hayes. I'm 39, and I discovered that family loyalty has its limits when my own mother stood up at my ex-husband's custody hearing and called me an unfit parent. Your Honor, my daughter has always been unstable. My mother's voice echoed through the packed family courtroom. She can barely hold down a job. She's been in and out of therapy. And frankly, I don't think she should have custody of my grandson at all. I sat at the defendant's table, wearing a simple navy blazer and white blouse, my brown hair pulled back in the same understated style I'd maintained for 15 years. The wedding ring I'd finally removed 6 months ago had left a pale band on my finger that seemed to glow under the harsh courtroom lights. My ex-husband Marcus smiled smugly from across the aisle, his expensive lawyer nodding along with my mother's devastating testimony. They'd clearly planned this ambush, knowing that my own mother's words would carry weight with any judge. She's never been able to provide stability, my mother continued, her voice growing stronger as she warmed to her theme. She disappears for days at a time. Claims she's working, but I've never seen evidence of any steady employment. My grandson needs a real home with his father, who has a successful career and can actually support him. 8-year-old Tyler sat in the front row next to my sister Karen, his dark eyes wide with confusion as he watched his grandmother testify against his mother. Karen avoided my gaze, her silence as damning as our mother's words. I thought about the past 2 years since my divorce, about the nights I'd spent agonizing over custody arrangements, while simultaneously handling some of the most complex cases in the state court system, about the careful balance I'd maintained between my professional responsibilities and my role as Tyler's mother. She lives in some tiny apartment downtown. My mother pressed on, drives an old car, can barely afford Tyler's school supplies. Meanwhile, Marcus has a beautiful home in the suburbs, a stable income, and the ability to provide the kind of life every child deserves. Judge Patricia Morrison sat behind the bench, her expression neutral as she listened to the testimony. She was a colleague I'd known for over a decade, someone who understood the demands of our profession, but she gave no sign of recognition as she maintained the impartial demeanor required of her position. Furthermore, my mother said, reaching her crescendo, Rebecca has always been secretive about her so-called work. She claims to have some important job, but she won't tell us what she actually does. For all we know, she could be involved in something illegal, something that would put my grandson in danger. The courtroom buzzed with murmured agreement. Marcus's family filled the left side of the gallery, all nodding along with my mother's character assassination. My side was nearly empty, just a few friends who'd taken time off work to support me. People who actually knew what I did for a living. Marcus's lawyer, James Crawford, stood to address the court. Your Honor, we believe the testimony clearly shows that the child's best interests would be served by awarding full custody to my client. The mother's inability to provide basic stability, combined with her secretive behavior regarding her employment, raises serious concerns about her fitness as a parent. I remained silent, my hands folded calmly in front of me, watching this orchestrated attack unfold. 15 years of judicial experience had taught me the importance of timing, of letting others reveal themselves before showing your hand. Ms. Hayes, Judge Morrison addressed me directly. How do you respond to these allegations about your employment and your ability to provide for your son? I stood slowly, my movements deliberate and controlled. Your Honor, I'd like to call a witness to address those concerns. Marcus's lawyer looked confused. Your Honor, we weren't notified of any witnesses. The witness wasn't available until this morning, I replied calmly, but I believe his testimony will clarify any questions about my employment status. Judge Morrison nodded. Very well. Please call your witness. I walked to the courtroom doors and opened them. A tall man in an impeccable dark suit entered, his silver hair perfectly styled, his bearing commanding immediate respect. Your Honor, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet courtroom. I'd like to call Chief Justice William Barrett to the stand. The gasp that went through the courtroom was audible. My mother's face went from confident to confused to horrified as the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court walked to the witness stand. Chief Justice Barrett, I began, my voice taking on the professional tone that had served me well for 15 years. Could you please identify me for the court? The Chief Justice looked directly at me, his voice formal but warm. You are the Honorable Rebecca Hayes, Associate Justice of the State Supreme Court, where you have served with distinction for the past 8 years. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. I could hear my mother's sharp intake of breath, could see Marcus's lawyer frantically shuffling through papers. And Chief Justice Barrett, I continued, could you describe the nature of my work responsibilities? Justice Hayes presides over some of our most complex civil and criminal cases, he replied. She sits on our appellate panel for death penalty cases, chairs our Judicial Ethics Committee, and has written several landmark decisions regarding family law and child welfare. Tyler's eyes were wide with amazement as he finally understood why his mother had to work late so many evenings, why she sometimes disappeared into her study with thick legal briefs, why she spoke with such authority about fairness and justice. One more question, Chief Justice, I said. Could you address the allegations about my financial stability? He smiled slightly. Justice Hayes earns a salary of $195,000 annually, plus benefits. She owns her downtown apartment, a penthouse actually, and maintains a vacation home in the mountains. Her financial disclosure forms are part of the public record as required for all sitting judges. I turned to face the courtroom where my mother sat with her mouth hanging open, her carefully constructed testimony crumbling around her. Your Honor, I addressed Judge Morrison. I'd like to explain to the court why my family was unaware of my position. Judge Morrison nodded, clearly intrigued. 8 years ago, when I was confirmed to the state Supreme Court, I made the decision to keep my professional life separate from my personal relationships. This wasn't because I was ashamed of my work. Quite the opposite. It was because I wanted my son to have a normal childhood without the pressure and scrutiny that comes with being a judge's child. I looked at Tyler, whose face showed a mixture of pride and confusion. I chose to live modestly, to drive a practical car, to shop at regular stores rather than high-end boutiques. I wanted Tyler to understand the value of hard work and humility, not to grow up entitled because of his mother's position. Marcus was staring at me as if he'd never seen me before. During our marriage, he'd constantly criticized my boring job at the courthouse, never bothering to ask about the details of my work. The reason I'm often unavailable for extended periods, I continued, is because I'm presiding over complex cases that can last weeks or months. The reason I couldn't always attend school events is because I was writing legal decisions that affect thousands of families across our state. Chief Justice Barrett spoke up. If I may add, Your Honor, Justice Hayes has one of the finest legal minds I've encountered in 30 years on the bench. Her decisions have been upheld by federal courts, and she's been recognized nationally for her work in family law. I walked back to the defendant's table, but I wasn't a defendant anymore. I was what I'd always been, a sitting judge with 15 years of legal experience and a reputation for fairness and integrity. Your Honor, I said to Judge Morrison, I've spent my entire career protecting children and families. I've written decisions that have removed children from abusive homes, that have ensured fair custody arrangements, that have put child welfare above all other considerations. The courtroom was completely silent. Now, the allegation that I'm somehow unfit to care for my own son is not only false, it's insulting to every family I've protected and every child whose interests I've safeguarded from this very bench. I turned to look at my mother, who had gone pale. What's particularly painful is that these allegations come from people who never bothered to ask about my work, who never showed interest in my career, who assumed the worst without seeking the truth. Marcus's lawyer was clearly scrambling. Your Honor, we had no knowledge of what? I interrupted. Of the fact that your client was married to a sitting state Supreme Court justice for 6 years and never bothered to learn what she actually did for a living. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Mr. Crawford, did your client not know his wife's profession during their marriage? Marcus finally found his voice, stammering. She said she worked at the courthouse. I thought she was a clerk or something. The absurdity of it hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I'd been married to a man who'd assumed I was a courthouse clerk for 6 years, who'd never questioned why I worked such long hours, why I brought home complex legal briefs, why I sometimes had to travel for judicial conferences. "Your Honor," I said, addressing Judge Morrison directly, "I'd like to submit my judicial performance evaluations, my financial disclosure forms, and my custody evaluation report prepared by Dr. Sandra Williams, a court-appointed child psychologist." Judge Morrison reviewed the documents quickly. "Dr. Williams rated you as an exemplar.